Welcome back, you guys. This is the art school graduate, and today's guest went from being a civil engineer student to a self-taught graphic designer to brand designer to a type designer, building a foundry dedicated to giving African languages a voice in the global typography. He is the founder of Udi Foundry and the creator of Ojuju typeface on Google Fonts. And as an advocate, he is making type design education accessible to all Africans across the continent. Welcome to my podcast, Chisaokwu Joboson.
You were close.
I was close. I'm trying, man. AKA, we're going to go with Chisa today, you guys.
Yeah.
So a little bit about Chisa. If you haven't seen his work, I will be sharing it with you. But for this conversation, I'm going to allow him to tell his story. This man is talented. His work speaks volumes. Everything that a designer is supposed to do, he is very intentionally doing it and giving 110% effort. So, Chisa, let's start from the beginning. You started with civil engineering, but now you're one of the most recognized type and brand designers coming out of Nigeria. For listeners hearing this for the first time, how did that structure in engineering translate to designing letter forms?
Thanks, Justin. It's quite interesting, the question, because at this point in time, I kind of forget that I did study civil engineering school. But yeah, I don't know if you would like the long story or the short form.
Whatever you feel gets people to understand who you are as a designer. Because I know it. I did my research. I'm letting people know. I want them to hear it from you.
Yeah. So I found design in school in my fourth year. Interestingly, it was very, I don't know if I would call it destiny, because how it happened was I was at a student fellowship, a church fellowship actually, and during a certain meeting in my fourth year, I did a 5-year program. So in my fourth year, I attended a meeting and they were trying to elect a public relations officer of some sort, who would like share information on whatever is going on in the community or the fellowship, kind of organize things and all that. And so I was kind of nominated and elected as a public relations officer. Then I would say I used to be, or I still am, growing up, I always wanted to do things like in an extra manner. So if I'm to do A to Z, A to B, I like to kind of go A to D.
Right.
And so I had to ask myself at that point in time, I'm given this role, though it could just be as simple as just sending messages, reaching out to people and whatnot. I felt there was a need to kind of be extra with this kind of role I had. And so I started to think about ways where I could share information that won't just be in a text format. And then I kind of stumbled upon the concept of designing. So there would be a certain event and I would try to, create a graphic towards that and then push it out.
Yeah.
And I remember doing that. Now I look back at it and it's like the worst creation to my name. But at that point in time, it served, and a couple of people kind of liked it, and encouraged me. I don't know why they did that, but yeah, that kind of gave me that boost where okay, I could kind of do this. And I kept doing it to a point where I felt to a point where people started to pay me, funny enough. And I was like, okay, maybe this
is looking good.
Yeah, this is something I could really do on the side.
Right.
And fast forward to, finishing school, there was this back and forth with, do I really keep this and focus on civil engineering as a career, or do I try to make this something I could take full time?
Right.
I tried to juggle both, but I started to see like this kind of pull towards doing graphic design. And then I told myself, perhaps maybe I should give this a try, like do it full time. And I did, from graphic to brand. And then, it was a thing where I was like, okay, I was getting the name, getting
Hmm.
clients. And I was
Right.
like, maybe I don't need to be civil engineer anymore. And before you know it, I'm here doing
And
type. So yeah, that's been the journey so far.
okay, let's touch on a little bit of like culture. Okay. You grew up in Lagos, but your roots are in Ginu. At what point did the adolescent visits, the festivals, the tradition start showing up in your design?
Yeah, I grew up in Lagos, but I hail from Enugu, it's the eastern part of Nigeria, and I would say I started to get a certain awareness of culture sometime, I would say quite recently, 3, 4 years back. And it was one where I started to question the idea of Eurocentric design, like we kind of say these are certain philosophies we should like work with. Design less is more,
Right.
you know, design should be minimalistic and certain ideals by
Right.
people,
Right.
who are not like really of our color, of our
Hmm.
culture, you
Right.
know. Yeah. And it started to have me questioning the idea of like, does this really apply to a certain type of people, Because at that point in time, I was just designing based on trends, based on what certain people would say, yes, this is what is the standard. And that started to like, make me question the philosophies we had. And then I started to also surround myself with, culture at that point in
Hmm.
time, the idea of festivals,
Yeah.
which were really particular to a certain type of people,
Uh,
also like with the colors, with how patterns were here, which was not really reflected in the standard of design or the standard industry when it
right.
came to design. I've into, you know, culture,
Yeah.
the people, the ideals was what made me like see a new side towards like design, new
Yeah.
perspective, and that was what kind of began everything.
So you describe yourself as a self-taught designer. What was the actual moment when you sat down and decided you were going to teach yourself the graphic design? Was it through the people reaching out to you and paying you? You're like, hey, I'm getting paid off of this? Or was it more of, okay, I like this process. I'm flowing with this process. I'm starting to understand more of the critical ideology of graphics. So which one was it that really was just like, okay, this is what I'm going to go for?
So the reality of um becoming an African designer really is that there are no institutions per se that teach design, you know. So for most part, you are bound to you just like your only resolve is to be self-taught, if you want to really learn design. And that was my part, from school. I was just like doing what I felt, kind of copying what I saw, to a point where I had a, consciousness of like design,
Yeah.
and realized that, well, design is more than what I was doing. And so I decided to like, obviously I couldn't maybe go to design
Right.
school. And so I decided to like, get myself acquainted with like online courses, the trends and whatnots,
Yeah.
self-educate.
Yes.
And that was what kind of like fueled my education to a point where I was like, okay, perhaps I could kind of enroll for online courses and, but for most parts, I've never stepped my foot in a physical design school. So
Uh-huh.
everything is kind of,
Self-taught.
yeah.
When you started I'm curious about this. When you started looking for these resources,
Yeah.
was it easy or was it hard? Or did you just or was it just kind of like what we call YouTube University? You just went on YouTube and just typed in, how do I design? Was it like one of those moments? So
Yeah.
explain those to me. Yeah.
A very, it's a very, I'm looking for the right word where it's chaotic.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's no roadmap,
No,
and
no.
yeah, you're just like, at this point, maybe you see this certain trend and you're like, okay, you need to figure out how to do this particular trend, and you jump on it and you're seeing the next, shiny thing to do,
Right.
So it was, YouTube University for the most part. It was much later I started to understand, starting out, it was graphic design. So, it's just poster design, you're not like, it's like how to make things nice,
Right, right, right.
until you now like, dive into like brand design, and is a different market altogether.
Yeah.
Maybe you're starting with logos, and then, you need to start, working on a full identity,
Yes.
and
Yes.
then you need to kind of understand branding and whatnot.
Yes.
Yeah. So, but again, it was really, really chaotic.
I believe it. I feel like with designers, they always want you to wear more than one hat. You
Yeah.
can't just be, hey, poster
Yeah.
design guy. They're like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, we want you to do the poster, the typeface, and can
Yeah.
you edit this picture? So that's why I was curious, like for you, how
Yeah.
did it start without the traditional? Because in school, they give you the foundation, the
Mm-hmm.
elements, the
Mm-hmm.
practice, the steps. But for
Mm-hmm.
you, it's just like, I like that. I'm gonna design that. How do I do it? If you just
Yeah.
thrust yourself in.
And you
Man,
keep
I
going
love it.
and keep
Yep.
going. Yeah.
Yes, I love that. So let's talk a little bit about brand design and identity. So for people who may not know or breathe design the way you and I do, how would you describe brand identity? Like, what is it designing that for someone?
That's an interesting question. Also, given I'm not so good at definitions, um, when I think about branding, I see it from, I'll term it as an art of perception, you know, and when you think about brand design, it's more of like designing um towards like creating good
Yeah.
perceptions of things,
Yeah.
be it by like through visual aspects of it, or trying to invoke an emotion or a feeling, just
Yeah.
to make it, whatever you're designing, whatever brand you're designing for, to make them acceptable to, who you're trying to sell to, or
Yes.
key from. So yeah, I feel like that's my definition of branding. You just creating, perceptions, good
Hmm.
perceptions. I mean, there's also bad branding or
Yeah.
branding not well done, and I'm
Yeah.
guessing the perception is not a nice one, but it's all about like painting that idea of like perception,
Yeah.
to the audience, the customers, yeah.
100%. So you've designed brand identities for a lot of African businesses. What's the difference between a brand that looks interesting and a brand that actually communicates the truth about the people behind it? Because, like you said, there is good branding and bad branding. And I'm not even going to say, being a designer, we have seen it either online or in person. So, what is the difference between a brand that looks interesting, that sparks the curiosity for the consumer or for whoever they're trying to get, and what brand that actually communicates the truth of the people behind it, the story behind it? So what's the difference between those two?
I think it all boils down to authenticity. Yeah. I mean, you can never fake it.
Right.
You can fake it
For
for
a
quite a,
while,
yeah.
then after that, people are going to be like, nah, that ain't.
And so yeah, I think it's authenticity. Another I would think would be storytelling. How well like brands, or the story behind like brands, like the mission, vision, what really, why does brand,
Yes.
Yeah, so I feel like that would really set people brands apart, So yeah, that's it.
So with Africa and all these places have deep cultural references and history and stories. How do you know which one to tell for that business?
Yeah, that's the tricky thing about
Yeah. Because the reason I ask is because culturally, it's in the
yeah.
United States, we have people that are gonna tell you different things. But
Mm-hmm.
with your work, you're very intentional about letting people know, like, "Made in Africa. This is us." So how do you balance that when people come to you for different brand identities where it's like you don't wanna infringe on this idea because this idea was used by someone else? How do you balance that, like you said before, that chaos of, like, telling the story, but being fair to the person?
I think it all boils down to the brief.
Mm.
Yeah, I feel because one a brand is they're never like same brands. There's a Nike and Adidas, but they have different,
Right.
stories behind why they exist. And so if anything, I would say it's more about approaching the brand as it
Mm.
is,
Mhm.
trying to find that unique thing about it and moving, with that. Interestingly, I would say Africa is really diverse,
Yeah.
so culturally or with ideals,
Uh-huh.
but still there's this sameness. If I'm
You can see it.
designing something, for a Nigerian audience, I'm kind of certain, people in South Africa would kind of get it, given the approach, given like a lot of, similarities
Right.
despite that diversity. So, again, it also like boils down to the audience because you can never
Uh,
like design for everybody. You can never
right.
serve everybody. So when you kind of put your target audience, your customers into like focus,
Yeah.
you start to realize, okay, perhaps this is what would work.
Yeah.
This is what would really, buy them in. This
Mhm.
is what they will resonate with and so on.
Okay, so you had mentioned before about design briefs, like that helps you out a lot. So
Yes.
what's the first question you ask at that design brief? What's the one thing you need to know before you turn on the computer, before you start writing down notes and things? What is that one question you always ask every client to make sure this is something I can work towards and start working on?
Yeah, I mean, aside the name of your brand,
Yeah.
it would I would want to know like what your brand is about. So when I hear a story, I probably know you're not bullshitting me. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's like it's something you have to make me willing or able to believe what you're about.
Right,
And
right.
also when you're telling your story, it's not one that kind of confuses me as a
Mhm.
first, listener. So I came to those things where like I'm willing to hear what that brand is about and
Right.
also like believe, from the first go, like, okay, yeah, this you're onto something good. Yeah.
Do you ever find I know you probably do. I'm just curious, but do you ever find those people that come to you with ideas or branding stuff that you're like, "Hey, this already exists," but they're telling you like, "No, this is something I've come up with." Have you ever had to deal with that?
Mm, yeah, a couple times. And then you have to like really like tell yourself, well, the money is kind of good. So
Just make it work.
yeah.
That's funny. Okay. So you talked about discovering your love for creating custom typefaces while designing brand identities, to the point where you would build them from scratch instead of using existing ones. What were you searching for that existing typefaces did not give you? Because every typeface person usually has a reference, right? So what was there or what wasn't being represented there that forced you to be like, okay, I need this is missing something and I need to put it there. What was that for you?
Yeah. Great question. I kind of felt, you know, I felt excluded and the grand scheme of, things when it came to representation and inclusion in design, not just as a designer, but also more especially as a consumer, as a user, and it's always the thing like, oh, design is global, and it's a question of like, yeah, it's you say it is, but is it truly? Are you
Mhm.
really representing? Does everyone feel like they have a seat at the table?
Right.
Yeah, and I always, I would design for African brands especially, and I
Mhm,
always go into fits where like I'm like, why isn't there certain symbols like or glyphs
mhm.
available? Like why do I have to really communicate in English?
Right.
If the brand is kind of catering for local consumers or people
Uh-huh.
who speak a certain language, where how can we represent those, or how can we communicate to those people
Mhm,
properly? And not just that, it was always like this blandness when it came to branding. You would do a great brand identity, and if it feels like you're slapping it with so much like, blandness with
yeah.
a certain, maybe a sans serif font,
Yeah.
and well, it really works when it comes to like, oh, it's the standard of like how design should be,
Uh-huh.
how it, minimalism and whatnot. But it would, in most cases, it lacked soul,
Mm,
there was that kind of like feeling, that emotion. It
mhm,
really lacked it. So I looked at these things and I wasn't really satisfied,
mhm,
because I would do the job nevertheless, but deep down I was like, yeah, if there was really a typeface that,
mhm.
you know, felt, had a certain like feeling or emotion that
Yeah.
it would really, that brand would really like be great. But you
Mhm,
know, at the end of the day, it doesn't exist. And so after, having it like really, really, stay in my mind for so long, I
mhm,
decided to like, maybe I could do something about it,
mhm.
and I started to dabble into type design, you know, and yeah, that story.
Yeah. So, how would you explain what type design actually involves to someone who's never considered it? Because, listen, type design is one of the most hidden disciplines in the design world. And then on top it off, most people use fonts every day without thinking who
Hmm.
crafted them, what's the story behind them,
Yeah.
why is this important? So, how would you explain type design to someone who's never considered it?
That's a tough one. And yeah, that's true. Because I feel like it's a good thing that people don't really notice it. I mean, eh, I guess they would notice if it's really bad. Yeah, but I feel like that it goes unnoticed is probably because it's good. It really serves. Just like it serves as an infrastructure of some sort.
Mhm.
I mean, nobody notices a road until it's bad.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
nobody notices would notice water unless it's like colored or
Yeah.
something. So
Yeah.
yeah, I feel like that's how type operates. Ideally, I would say type is spoken language in a digitized format.
Huh.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
that would be a very like nice way to put it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So, type design has a reputation of being extremely technical and precise. I know
Yeah.
it, you know it. So, what surprised you most about the craft once you started actually getting into it?
How rigorous it was.
Yes.
Yeah.
My God, yes.
Perhaps if I knew, I would have tried to do it, because no, I now I get why
Yes.
not there are not a lot of type designers, because it's a lot of work. Initially, when I instead of like doing type explorations, I was like,
Mhm.
I'm designing an A today, I'm designing a K, and I'm having fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got it on lock,
Yeah.
but when like started my first typeface, yeah, I was like, nah, I was
Chisa,
in for
let me tell you, brother, the one thing I have hated about type is kerning.
yeah.
Kerning, my Lord help us.
There's so many.
Kerning,
I
yes,
don't know if I should be saying this because I don't want people to listen to me and be like, nah, they won't do type, because I really want people to try it. But no, it's, first you have to draw. Then when you're
yes,
done drawing, you need to get certain like, parameters and metrics,
yeah.
and then you have to, that kerning, you take months.
Yeah, I was just about to say hours.
No,
It's
I
like
was, I was,
the
I was
drawing
if
part is easy. Yeah.
you're like on, the 1% of 1%, but
Yeah.
1% of 1% don't take hours.
But
you
it's
know,
just,
you have to kern, you have to prove, then you kern again. It's a lot of work. And
oh,
it kind of makes me appreciate those who like were into like the craft or the
yeah.
into the industry, because most time, like you said again, people use type without noticing like, oh, you know, people actually design them,
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So having to, some typefaces take years to actually,
Get,
complete,
yeah.
and then someone can download it in a couple of minutes or
Seconds. And
seconds
yeah.
and use it. And so yeah, a lot of work really goes into that. And I feel like people don't appreciate type designers well enough.
Right. I listen, my hat's off to him. I remember
Yeah.
when I took my first type class, I was like, "Oh man, I got this. This is
Yeah.
easy." Because my background is in graffiti. So I'm already ahead of the
Yeah.
turn when it comes
Mm-hmm.
to drawing and writing letters. It's easy
Mm-hmm.
for me.
Yeah.
When they were like, "All right, we got to kern it," I was like,
Mm-hmm.
"What's that? We got to do what?" Okay. And I'm telling you, it worked my butt.
Yeah.
I was the first one done drawing because it was easy.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Mm-hmm.
understanding the upper and lowercase, making sure they all
Yeah.
relate. If the
Mm-hmm.
uppercase does this, make sure all uppercase do this. If the
Yeah.
lowercase does that, drawing that easy. Whip out a ruler, a grid, draw my
Mm-hmm.
grid, and I'm done. They're like, all
Mm-hmm.
right, we're going to digitize it and kern it. I was in that lab for hours. Like, come on, man, come on. Because, and the thing is once you start to kern, you start to visually see those spaces, those little, like you can see this is a little, like even though they're next to each other, you can see that little gap is bigger. And you're like, damn, I got to go back
You
and
know,
do it again.
yeah. And then you start to kind of hate the process. It's
Yeah.
like you have to stare at it every day. Like when do I get done with this?
Break. When am I done? Actually, dude, I'm glad someone else fills that page. Someone fills that. But the outcome is when it's completed, you're like, that breath, that fresh breath where it feels like you've been holding your breath that whole time. And then you're like,
And then you're on to the next one.
yep. Yes, sir. So, you have a phrase that I think captures your design philosophy very well. You described African design as chaos, but it's good chaos, chaos that works. So, can you unpack that idea for us?
You really dug in deep. Because I remember saying this, saying that years back. I don't know how long ago, but it is. Yeah, that's beautiful. Yeah, and yeah, that's a philosophy. I guess it's maybe if I should pass away and make it as a someone with a legacy, that would really stand.
Mhm.
But I do feel African design is chaos, good chaos. And it's more of like I would say first off, it's a certain way of rebelling against Eurocentric or Western design philosophies, that kind of point towards like design should be very minimalistic, less is more, and
Yeah.
it's always like who makes those rules,
Mhm.
And when you key into African design, I research or what is actually true to African design, you
Mhm.
realize that, design is not minimalistic.
Right.
Design is not all those things we're told design is meant to be.
Right.
And so, given that design does not really conform to those ideals, then perhaps design might be chaos, and, not chaos in a negative way,
Mhm.
chaos in a good way,
Mhm.
chaos that might not be really understood by the Western, designers or the Western world, but still, very much like relatable to Africans. Yeah.
Got
So
it. Yeah. Thank you for breaking that down. Because when I saw it, I was like,
yeah.
what does that mean? What does that mean? But
All right.
but being a designer, I understand the chaos.
Yeah.
I understand it because it's and for you, I feel like you're bringing in more
Mm,
of it's not chaos. The word I'm looking for is you're bringing in more of identity that
yeah.
hasn't kind of been seen worldwide. Like all the things you just said, the European design, French design, all these different design. We've seen that, but we haven't seen something that's so for what you're doing, you're laying the groundwork. You're setting the path for other brand and type designers to follow because it's like you're standing in front looking back like how am I supposed to do this? But you're forging through this chaos of design and saying, "Hey, we're here. Our voice matters. Listen to us." And that's why I was like, "Okay, I want to hear his thoughts on it because I have my ideas about it, but man, you that's beautiful the way you broke that down.
Thank
So
you.
let's talk about the intersection of brand design and type design, because let's be honest, most designers just stay in their lane. They don't want to be that, master of jack of all trades. They don't want to be it, but rarely people do both. So how does working in both worlds make you a better designer in each world?
That's a very very trick question. Yeah, I think I would say I work at this intersection of like brand and type because I'm probably not willing to give up brand design
Yeah, right.
because I see how it's one where like, oh, you're trying to like test the waters and you dip
Yeah,
your foot into and you're like, oh, it's so cold.
yeah.
Maybe I won't swim. Interestingly, I feel, type can't do without brand and brand can't do without type, because when you think about, I see most times when I imagine brands, I see it from this is a person, identity, visual, verbal identity,
Mhm,
also both visual and brand. So both visual and verbal. You think about like the systems around it, built around it, and you're like, this is like you building a human being, And then when you think about, typography as an aspect of like branding, it's more of like the voice of that person, you know. And interestingly, we can tell a person without seeing them from how they sound.
mm,
Yeah,
yeah,
if someone calls you and you can tell like you
who
don't
it
need to
is.
yeah, who it
Yeah,
is. And that's how type operates, you
mhm,
know. And so in a way it's like intertwined, you
yeah,
know, where you are building a brand and you kind of need to get
right,
the type right, And so when people also build typography, build type design or typefaces, they're trying to create voices for something
mhm,
which is be it a brand, be it, a story. And that is how I look at things, you
yeah,
know,
yeah,
and
yeah.
that kind of,
So let me ask you this. Many people may not understand this, but brand design is about speed and communication, right?
yeah.
And even though type design, we look at letters and we just read it and use it. So you think it would be fast too, but it's
Uh,
not. Type design is often slow and obsessive. We just spoke about it with this whole kerning process. So, how do those two rhythms ever feel like they're pulling you in opposite directions? Like, is there that tension between, okay, I got this design brief, I got this, but they want me to do a typeface. I can do all this, but it's gonna take me about X amount of time to do this, you
yeah.
know, type. Do you ever have that tension or fight where you're just like, what am I doing? What's happening here?
Yeah. A lot of times. I think where it kind of, that tension kind of like, stays at its minimal point is when you kind of set the tone for how you want to create a type for a brand, in a sense where like you are definitely not, going so much into a lot of character sets,
Mhm,
you're trying to just design what is probably required or going to be used by um the brand to,
mhm,
communicate.
mhm,
And yeah, I guess I
mhm.
guess a lot of people do not really get it right because at the end of the day, it's like you're trying to like maybe balance quality with
Yeah,
the time frame you have.
yeah.
I don't know, perhaps you might not really get it properly compared to if you had much time to do
Mhm,
it. But again, it's just trying to find that balance. Uh,
mhm.
the tension would always be there, but at the end of the day, if you could. get the brief right and maintain that balance, I guess everything will really go.
It'll just fall in place once you
Yeah,
get into that rhythm. That makes sense. Yeah. But I'm just curious about that because it's so one is so time one is more time consuming than the
yeah,
other. So that's why I was wondering about that.
definitely. And I
So
feel like, when you start to like, it's always different when you are creating a typeface maybe for yourself in a way,
yeah.
compared to when you're creating for a client.
Yeah.
It's kind of like the
100%.
same thing like design projects. You
Yeah.
have all the time in the world to like design for yourself, but when it's a client, okay, you're working with time, and so
Okay.
you really
Yep.
need to get things done.
Yeah.
It's like ASAP.
Yeah. So I'm curious about this. Knowing that you dwell in both worlds, what does a typeface say that other design elements cannot?
A lot. It's like I said, it's the voice of the brand. If you
Yeah.
take that out, people might see what your brand is about, but they won't be able to like hear you.
Yeah.
And so a type or a font would kind of carry that voice, also like
Mhm.
emotions.
Yeah.
There's a way you see a certain typeface and it kind of invokes something like, be it
Mhm.
if it's, you know, oh, maybe calls you to play,
Mhm.
calls you to be serious.
Mhm.
Yeah, so it's mostly the voice.
So when you look at these typeface now, because there's not a lot of typeface designers out there. I
Yeah.
spoke with Trey Seals about this, and we had this conversation where he was like, "Yeah, there's 9 billion people in the world, but there's only like I think he said at that time I think it was like 230 typeface designers," and I was like, "Wow." So you being one of these typeface designers, when you look at a typeface now, what do you see that some people who aren't type designers would usually miss? What do you see?
First of all, I would say Tracy was a goat. Yeah, I mean, things I see which
Yeah.
other people don't, Kerning.
We always come back
Yeah,
to that one. We come back to
yeah,
kerning,
definitely.
dude. We can't get away from it.
I think one particular thing I would say it's feeling. Yeah, because you could, and I guess that is, I don't know if it's a gift or a cost, being a type designer where you can feel a type, you know, and you can like, sometimes like I go out and like, staring at this type and, I have people say, what am I staring at? And I'm like, "Ah, can you not see? And
Yeah.
no, it's just letters. Yeah, so I think it's feeling.
But
Yeah.
I'm gonna agree with you on the filling aspect of it because my thing to do, and it drives my wife crazy, we
Yeah.
get a menu from a restaurant.
Yeah. And you're obsessing.
I'm like, why they got 5 different fonts? What
Yeah.
is who
You
did
know,
this?
and she doesn't even care. She just wants to order the food. Yeah.
Exactly that. That's me. I was like, she's like, "What are you gonna get?" I'm like, "I'm trying to figure out why there's 4 different fonts in this one section." She was like, "Find something to eat." Or we're
Mm,
like, she gets it now, but now it's like I've learned, let me order
yeah.
first, and they're like, "Can I take your menu?" I'm like, "No, give me a minute.
Yeah.
Give me a minute, because 'cause I'm just looking like, why do people do this? But I get it when you said that, the feeling of it, because when you're a designer or a type designer, see, you see it differently. Your
Yeah.
eyes look at
Definitely.
the layout, the look, the type, the spacing, the imagery, the colors. You look at all that. Yeah, I know that's the gift and the curse. You can see
Yeah.
it, but then you want to call it out. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about your typeface and your foundry. All right. You founded Udi Foundry to become the home of your African inspired type work.
Yeah.
What does the name Udi mean, and why is it important to have a foundry with this identity?
Great question. So Udi is an Igbo word. It means a type of, a group of. So at a point, I was thinking about like, then I started like doing type design, and I was like, okay, how does the industry work?
Yeah.
And I dive into the industry and make some research, and everyone is having a foundry. You know, I'm like, okay, I guess that's how I should position myself. You
Mhm.
know, and at that point in time, I wasn't really sure about the path I was going. towards, having to just create. I was like, if I start off like in this journey of like having to create like
Mhm.
African typefaces, solely African typefaces, is it one where I'm just boxing myself, and so I wanted room for experimentation where I kind of,
Mhm.
have typefaces outside that, you know.
Yeah.
And so I was like, okay, maybe I should call it something. And Udi, being like a group of, I was like, okay, yeah, that's a nice name. I mean, I'm
Mhm.
I'm Igbo, so it was only right I kind of like,
Mm.
found words that would kind of relate to what I was trying to do. And yeah, that was just like the name, the idea behind the naming.
So now let's talk about your breakout typeface, Juju. It was
Yeah.
accepted by Google Font. It supports 874 languages, brother. Congrats. That
Thank you.
that is beautiful in itself.
Yeah.
And the reaction from designers across the continent was enormous. Take
It
us
was
back
crazy.
to when Simon first reached out about your Google Fonts project.
Yeah.
What was going through your mind? So let's talk about when he first reached out, and then we'll come back to like what was going through your mind.
Yeah. Big shout out to Simon and Cowie. At that point, I'd never like really, because Simon is, I would term him to be an African design visionary. He's very passionate about African design and making it matter. And that at some point in my career, I was like really, I was fascinated by his ideals per se. Also given at that point I was trying to find my way into like African design, but I was really so my learning was really heavy on Western design philosophies, and you know the clientele, everything really came from, that part of the world. So it was more of like me unlearning things. And, Simon was kind of that person who you like, oh, okay, he has this idea, and
Yeah.
whatnot. But then, we were just like mutuals, but
Yeah.
yeah, it was just that. And I think early 2023, he reached out to me. I was like, oh, there's this Google Font initiative where they're trying to get like people to Africans, especially to design typefaces, that would support African language because that has been a very big issue in the type
Yeah.
design industry
Just
where
overlooked.
yeah, just
Yeah.
overlooked. Yeah, crazy man. And he was like, would I be, willing to kind of be part of this, idea or project? And I was like, hell yes. Without any hesitation, I was
Yeah,
like, yeah,
yeah.
of course, and he was like, okay, cool, cool. And I sent him some details and that was it. So
Mm.
it was like radio silence for a while. And I was like, oh, perhaps I don't know. I just didn't think about it and kept on doing
Mhm.
other things until like September, if I'm correct. I was like Q3 of
Yeah.
that year. Dave Crossland reached out to me um from the Google Fonts team. I was like,
Mhm.
oh, there was a recommendation from Simon. He said like you'll be interested in this. Do you have a typeface or an idea, which we could have on Google Fonts? And that was how, Ojuju kind of like started. Or the idea came about, and yeah, I was like, okay, yeah, I have this idea, and we bounced it off. I was like, okay, yeah, this is a good one. And
Mhm.
what did you came to light? That really took like a lot of time,
Yeah.
I thought it would be like an easy walk in the park,
No,
you
it's
know.
never that easy sometimes.
It's not, and it was, because I had those ideas, but then I didn't have like the knowledge of how to go about designing a
Yeah.
typeface. So at that point, I was like, perhaps it would not be so difficult given I had the idea, given I had drawn,
Right.
yeah, and I was like, that would be it. But it was a lot, I mean, after 6 months, we're done with it. I had a collaborator, Miko, great guy, who kind of helped me through the process, and then we had it out. And I can remember like the night. it dropped, my phone was buzzing, man.
I
Like,
believe it. That's crazy.
like that's the that was like, I don't know, that I've never like had a moment before, and it was like, wow, I couldn't like really contain I didn't know how to feel, you know. At some point I was really relieved, because I was like, yeah, it's finally out. And I was like really humbled and I was really proud and I was like having so much emotions at the same time, like, okay,
Right.
yeah, I did this, and yeah, I'm like, people like this, and I was like, wow, people like this.
Hot.
Yeah, so it was like so many emotions, but I was really happy with the reception because, for one, um, the name really struck, really stuck to people. Like people could really relate to it, especially people from because Ojuju we call masquerades, African masquerades
Yeah.
Ojuju. So, when people were like, yeah, you look, and they're like, yeah, it actually looks like Ojuju.
Yeah.
Like, I get what you're trying to
Yeah.
do,
Yeah.
and like that emotion, that feeling, it was really like there. And I was like, yeah, I'm glad.
So, what was the hardest technical thing you had to learn from scratch for this project?
Well, it was the idea behind the type design, the technicalities, also given the fact that the typeface was working on, it was breaking certain rules,
Yeah.
you know, it was it was breaking the rules like of type design per se,
Hmm.
where you're meant to have this at a certain like matrix, and
Yeah.
then you're working your way from there. So it was us trying to figure out, and it was me trying to figure out because in my head I was like, if I could draw it,
Yeah.
you know, it would not be so difficult to have it digitized.
Right.
So I was like really in for, you know,
A rude awakening.
yeah, yeah, because Ojuju was like, so a lot of typefaces are usually um, you know, contrast,
Yeah.
you know, or on the contrast axis. Mine was
Hmm.
reversed. So it's a reverse
Yeah.
contrast was like I'm walking my way upside down, if I
Right.
would
Right.
say
Right.
it that way, you know. And I don't know if that was the proper way to learn because I sometimes I wish I actually learned the right way and
Yeah.
not on, maybe I would, it wouldn't be so difficult at that
Hmm.
point in time because I was really learning as I was designing.
Mm.
And that was
Yeah.
really, it was a lot.
Yeah. Takes you back to that YouTube University. You're like, let me see if I can
Yeah.
look this up. So, I want to talk about the moment you just described. You said when it dropped, your phone was blowing up.
Yeah.
What did that tell you about the hunger that existed for this kind of work?
And it told me a lot. It told me, it actually validated the fact that, what I was creating had a home. It was something that needed to exist,
Yeah.
and so it felt like people were waiting on it, so it wasn't something that felt foreign,
Hmm.
it wasn't something that felt very like unusual.
Right.
It was something like kind of was a necessity,
Yeah. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
it just gave me that like moment of like, yeah, I think I'm on the right path with this one. Yeah.
So I want to adventure into you building these communities now. Now that you've hit the ground running, you're building into community thought, which is like bringing a lot of influence and things together. So beyond creating typefaces, you founded Type Africa to make type design education more accessible and affordable to designers on the continent. What's the gap you keep seeing that needs to be filled with education that is part of your mission?
I think I just don't want to be the only one.
Man, that's a good place to feel because some people are like, I love being the monolith. I love
Nah,
being the only one. But you're
it's
saying you don't want to. Why is that?
I don't want to because I've kind of been in the industry and really come to realize that the work is not from one person. There's a lot of work that needs to be done. That's the honest truth. And I don't think I have all the answers. I feel like there's a need to have this knowledge well distributed to a lot of people, as many people as we can have, this knowledge distributed to. And in doing that, it would kind of cause a ripple effect where there are lots of like, individuals
Mhm.
shaping, and not just individual, like typeface is kind of shaping the future of like African typography,
Mhm.
and I think if anything, my work is kind of setting a foundation, you
Mhm.
know, and so when I think about education community, I feel is one where we're really early, we're still like
Mhm.
young, and it really requires people who are really, really willing to do the work, and help the community or help the, and that's how I see it. So the work is so much, and
Yeah.
I can't be
Just
the only
having some
one.
help. Just have some help.
Yeah,
Yeah.
let everyone come and let's do the
Right.
digging. Let's plant. Let's sow so we can reap.
Yeah. Now, you said Africa's typography history is largely undocumented,
Very
which
much.
makes it harder to create work that draws from a rich historical foundation. How do you design with cultural depth with the archive itself being completely incomplete?
That's a very nice question to ask. And yeah, it's one that's really troubled me for a long time, especially when I got into the industry, because I remember when I dropped Juju, and I saw comments where certain people were like, "Oh, I hope you would actually like, you know, use your expertise to cater for minority scripts,
Mm,
yeah,
yeah.
indigenous scripts, and these are
Yeah.
scripts that do not use the A to Z,
Hmm.
coming from a colonized, um, country, and also from the time I was, born, we use A to Z, the Latin script. And so I never really knew what it was like to
Hmm.
have, to write before colonization, how, how
Yeah.
writing, how communication was.
Yeah.
And so it kind of like reawoken that,
Hmm.
reality that there's a lot that's been lost,
You
you
woke
know.
up the ancestors.
I would say that.
Yeah.
Well, then it's the question of like, what was it like then? And
Yeah.
there's little or no documentation of, the past, and so I kind of start to key into what, um, culture per se. I feel like
Hmm.
culture has been a strong reference for me when I create typeface, because, you know, culture is, a way of life for people, and when I when I go into culture and take in like elements that are really African per se, I can find ways to kind of, reinvent the wheel and create
Yeah.
something that can probably stand as a standard for a future generation. So yeah, I feel like there's a lot of work towards, perhaps there will be a time where we would have more people getting, and that's why I talk about like we need more people, because it could be, I don't know if I have the time to really dig into the past,
Right.
and then get it right, or get information and then bring it to the
Got you.
present, and then design, but if we have people in those places who are doing all that, I feel like maybe the work would be lesser, and maybe we would have like more documentation.
That
Yeah.
makes sense, man. That makes a lot of sense right there. So, Chisa, we're gonna take a little break and we're gonna have a little rapid fire. So these are going to be which ones you think, how you feel, okay? So
All right.
you give me your best answer. They might be a little difficult. I've stumped one person. One person has not given me a straight answer. So, yeah, so let's see what we got here. Favorite typeface that's not your own.
Of all times, or just
Remember, there's 298
yeah.
designers list, typefaces
All
list. So I'm just messing with you. But yeah, favorite typeface that's not your own.
right. Currently, I would say, um, hmm, I would say Sonke. Sonke by Osmond Chuma. Chuma is Tshuma.
Spell it again. TSH.
Yeah, UMA.
UMA.
Yeah,
There it is. Yes.
yeah.
Wow. Nice. Okay.
That's.
If you had to do one for the rest of your life, brand design or type design?
Oh my goodness, this is a tricky one. Cause I don't know.
I love that you're like trying to, but it's only one for the rest of your life. Which one would
Oh
it be?
goodness. I think I'll go with brand design because
Brand design.
in a way I would have to like dabble into type.
So it's still there just a little bit. All right. Okay. Let's see. One thing about African design that the global design community still gets wrong.
That's a lot.
The one
Yeah,
thing they get
I think
wrong.
as a fact that it's Latin, or we use because we probably speak English or we're probably colonized, and so everyone speaks or writes with the Latin script, and if you really dig into it, there are a lot of like ingenious scripts that needs to be catered for, and no, not a lot of people are actually doing this. So, yeah, that's
Okay.
about.
Here we go. Harder craft. Crafting a full brand identity or crafting a typeface from scratch.
I no second guess.
I know that one too. All right. Here we go. One word that describes great typography.
Wow. That's this is a very looking for a right word. One word. Great typography, right?
Yeah. One word that describes great typography. Yep.
Can I skip?
I got a stump. This is the second person I've stumped with a
No, no.
question. Okay. Yes.
I would say emotion. Yes.
So here we go. Last question. One word that describes African design.
Where do you get these questions from?
Research, man. You just got to look it up and see what people are into, what they like. And so it's just like one word that could describe it.
I would say eccentric.
Eccentric. Okay.
Yeah.
Look, you made it, brother. It wasn't that
Yeah, I
bad.
did. I did. I almost gave up though. Yeah, right.
Okay. Well, Chisa, we're having a wonderful conversation. Just got a few more questions before we wrap this up. So let's talk a little bit about, the human connection through design and what you're trying to do. What is something about creativity that you understand now that you wish you had when you first started?
One thing about creativity, I wish I knew when I started. I think I would say I kind of wish that's some deep question. I'm really searching in my soul to goodness. Really great questions. I
Well,
would say,
do you think it would be like access? Would that be something? Or is it
yeah.
more along the lines of like, it's through our conversation, it was just like you've had the talent.
Mm-hmm.
It was just the resources weren't there.
Yeah.
That's what I would think. But what do you think? What's coming to mind now?
So and it's quite similar with what you just said. And I think it would be education. But I think access is puts it better. But yeah, I kind of wish I think it's not just I'm not just speaking for myself. I'm speaking for a lot of people who come from where I'm from. It's really about like having proper education, and in having that, I feel it would really it's probably would have kind of grew my creativity,
Mhm,
on a very like, expon level
mhm,
than how I'm not really I'm not I don't feel sad on my journey,
uh-huh,
because I feel like that was what I needed to go through to get to this point.
right.
But I feel like perhaps if I had like access to education,
Mhm,
it would really be smooth.
mhm.
There won't be so many like, y-
Bumps in the road. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So you design letter forms that carry African languages and African stories into a global design ecosystem that has historically been ignored or even at times erased. What does it feel like to be doing that work right now in this particular moment of time? Because you're literally bringing those stories back to life. So, what does it feel like doing this work now?
In this moment, right?
Yes.
Yeah, this it's been quite humbling. It's been hard, I won't lie. Yeah, it's been tough. But also it's been beautiful because tough in the sense where like I didn't really understand what I was getting into. I keep saying I felt it would be, it was,
Yeah.
I thought, so how hard could it be? You know, so I got
Famous
to
last words.
yeah. Yeah, it's really hard, but it's really beautiful because in a way it's rewarding to me because I am solving a problem I had, a problem I saw, a problem I waited for a long time for someone else to solve. And, no one else came and I was like, okay, perhaps maybe I could help contribute. Maybe I could, find a solution, and in having to solve this problem, I'm realizing it's actually solving not just my problem, but a lot of people, a large amount of people, if not an entire continent, and that's the drive. That's what keeps me going,
Mhm.
that's where I find beauty in. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, this one is kind of it's gonna have you think a little bit, but many designers from outside the Western design tradition often feel pressure to code switch their aesthetics, to be taken seriously, to fit in, to be put in all these design magazines,
Yeah.
So, how do you deal with that tension in your own work? Or is there no tension for it because you're trying to tell your story?
I I won't fault them because I feel, yeah, I mean, the world is really like, it really revolves around the corporate, Western system or society per se. And if you really want to be recognized, it feels like you need to tap into, what the global standards of design are, and which might not, you know, cater for your culture, for, your people and whatnot. Um, and so I'm like, I used to be that kind of person, that kind of designer where I was like,
Mhm.
I need to really, get on with this trends,
Mhm.
I need to be updated with this, and until I started to kind of key into African design. And I feel like at the end of the day, it's about finding your path, to be
Mhm.
honest. I feel like it is very necessary to not lose ourselves as much as we want to. Yes, we want to create for brands, global, we want to kind of like be known. But I think at the end of the days, it's your path to, to
Yeah.
find, to discover, and for me, this has become my path. Um, Perhaps I might dabble into the
Right.
the global world, but I guess for the fact I'm doing this, I'm getting recognition because it's important work,
Yeah.
and so I'm like, yeah, maybe this is where I should be, so yeah.
Yeah. So now let's talk about the younger generation coming up behind you. If a younger designer in Nairobi, Lagos, and other countries and cities around you, if they're listening to this and they feel like the path you walked is not available to them, what would you say to that person?
Create your own. Yeah, because I really struggled with like finding a path per se. I really wished that, I had people before me who had done, the kind of work I was doing, who like looked like me, and but it was kind of difficult to find those people. Also, like with documentation, we keep mentioning how, there were no proper documentation history. There's no history of like African design per se. Y-
Right.
And so it was really tough. I kind of feel myself like perhaps maybe I should create my own,
Hmm.
And I think we need more young African designers creating their own parts,
Hmm.
you know, putting in like contributing in their own way. Who knows, your design style could be uh it takes me back to the time of the resonance, in
Hmm.
art. It felt like everyone was trying to break free from what, the ideal way of
Yeah.
doing art or
Yeah.
painting was,
Yeah.
and there was a rise of different,
Yeah.
icons, art icons per se,
Yeah.
artists. I think that's what I would really encourage young African designers to do. Create your
Mhm.
own. So it will definitely resonate with someone, and you'll be contributing to the entire discourse of like African design.
Now, since you've built this foundry, you have
Mm.
Type Africa. What do you want this next generation of African type designers to understand about the moment they are designing in right now?
I want them to be proud. I think I want them to keep pushing. I want them to walk towards seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. Because it's
Mhm.
it's really tough, you know. You really start off and then, I don't know. I feel like there's certain times where I almost wanted to quit, and just go back to brand design,
Yeah.
because you have to kind of consider like, oh, am I even going to make money from this? And like, oh, you're doing brand design, you have clients. Why are you like stressing over something like,
Right.
maybe someone else will do the hard work,
Right.
and there are moments like that, and I feel like it's very important for especially like type designers or young type designers to kind of persevere.
Mhm.
If you have an idea and you're really certain that this is something that would really contribute to African typography,
Mhm.
keep going, find ways you could actually put it out there. And yeah, that's what I would actually advise.
So, Chisa, let's talk about your legacy, which is going to be a great one. It's going. You're listen. Not many. You don't have to hope, brother. People are going to know. You're going to be seen. But I want to talk about you. When someone reads a headline set
Mm,
in Ojuju or a brand built their whole design and typeface from one of your designs and your typefaces,
yeah.
or someone discovers design through Type Africa, what do you ultimately hope they feel and what do you want them to carry with them from those experiences?
That's a lovely question. I'll start by saying it's always interesting when I see people use my typeface because I,
Mhm.
for one, have not used my typeface. I think it's because I've been really sat with it for so long.
Right.
I don't want to see it anymore. It's always like, oh, someone used this in this sense. And I'm like, wow,
Yeah.
it's always intriguing and humbling. So I would love them to feel catered for, to feel represented, like to feel like they are important,
Mhm.
their language is important, the culture is important, they are important. And so, that exclusion is just temporary. I feel like where we stand right now, it's one where, the true essence of like, oh, when you say design is global, you're like, okay, yeah, you say it, but now I feel it. And that is what I want probably my legacy to be
Mhm.
about, where people don't just feel excluded, they feel represented, feel seen. So yeah.
Chisa, my brother, I'm gonna open the floor to you. Where can the people find you and what do you have coming up?
Yeah, I love it. So you can find me, Joboson Chisa, no underscores, no dots. Yeah, it's just Joboson underscore on Instagram, Twitter, mostly every platform. Yeah. And what I'm working on, yeah, still working on Type Africa. If you are an African who, has an interest in type design or how type is being created, and you might want to learn, yeah, there's Type Africa where I kind of like teach Africans how to design type. Because yeah, we need more Africans in type design. Yeah, Udi Foundry. I think I did release a typeface recently. It's called
Mhm.
2P Grotex, and it's centered around the idea of what type or or what typography was like, post-colonial Africa.
Mhm.
So I'm thinking like when the Africa and the Westerners like were done colonizing us and gave us their scripts. and we're trying to like make sense of it. How did we write, and so it's a very interesting typeface.
Mhm.
You could check it out on my Udi Foundry website, udiffoundry.com. I think I have one more in me for on typeface before. I wrap things up for the year, but yeah, let's see how things go.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Well, you guys, and he also forgot, I'm a flex for him. He's speaking at Stanford
Oh
on
yeah,
design for belonging.
yeah,
He ain't gonna
definitely.
flex for him, but I told him I was gonna do it for him.
Thanks, Justin.
So, yes, you guys, thank you so much for listening to our podcast today. My name is Justin Robinson. I have the talented, the originator, the starter, the man that's paving a way where there is no way in type design for Africans, my
So
man
humble.
Chisa, and this is Art School Graduate. I'll catch y'all later. Peace.
Bye.